Hey there, and welcome to the first Music Career Study Group of 2025, where we'll be talking about our predictions for the music industry for the coming year. My name is Kevin Bruner. Joining me is Chris Robley. Chris, 2025 is already
It's here.
We're barely over a weekend, and it's already starting out to feel like a year of centuries, maybe. It's just, I was
Like,
telling somebody yesterday that this week has already had more headlines, global headlines from all sorts of places and aspects of life than probably an average year. I mean,
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
it's so
Weeks
insane.
weeks contain months, months contain years, for sure. Hey, on the topic of predictions, which we're gonna do today, you and I have done this a lot. Every end of year or beginning of year, we do our round of predictions, and you're usually wrong about half. I'm not saying you, but anyone making these
Anyone,
predictions
yes.
is usually wrong about half of it. But there's one thing I can confidently predict for the year ahead, which is that at some point I will shave my face and cut my hair.
Ah, excellent.
Because
That's
I've
good.
noticed I'm getting a little shaggy here.
See,
So
Chris,
that's
it's always great to make predictions where you can control the outcome.
exactly.
um, this is the Music Career Study Group. If you're just joining us, say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Weigh in. We want to know what your predictions for this year are, whether it's for your career personally, the industry at large, or the world, whatever. We want to share notes and just have a good conversation and plan our year as we attempt to continue to move our music careers forward in 2025.
We've got David from Westford, Massachusetts. Hey, David, how's it going? Stack.
Yeah. Great. Oh yeah. Thanks, David. Chris, before we dive in, while people are logging on and saying hi and letting us know where they're watching from, did you have any New Year's resolutions or any, especially music career related things that you're like, I am going to do this in 2025?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna put out a new album. By the way, hello to Atlanta and Austin, Texas. And it's about 90% done. You know that phase where you think you're almost there, but the last 10% takes you forever because it's just all the little details that you've left for last. Anyways, I've called my producer friend. We're kind of gonna be on a schedule where I'm gonna try to complete one of those songs per month and get the damn thing out because I'm really proud of it. So that's my resolution, is put this album out.
We've got Malia watching from Yorba Linda, who she lives in Pasadena but evacuated because of fires. Yeah, crazy stuff happening in LA. And yeah, stay safe, people, if you're in LA. I'm already seeing videos of people who are like going and doing a little like disaster tourism, and that crap just has to stop. It's like, just don't, stay out of the way, let people do the work they need to do and help the people that need help.
I got South Africa, London, New Zealand.
London. Yeah, we've got
the first 10% take. All right, so David, clearly you have more work to do than I do then, but
yeah, I feel like with making music in an album, the first 10% and the last 10% are the worst. Like just getting the ball rolling, and especially because a lot of times when you're like, maybe if you just have a bunch of demos and you're like, now I got to set up the sessions, I got to start getting basic tracks, I got to do it feels like a lot of tedious work before you get in the flow and you're like creating, and then the last 10% is more of that tedious work.
Yeah. Mostly because you return back to your regular life. You're not in studio or recording mode, so then you have to kind of steal time from your regular schedule to finish it. But
yeah,
we got someone in Philly tuning in. Chris, I heard a bit of your lunchtime music live. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with go follow Chris on Instagram, or is that the best place for them to follow you, Chris?
Yeah, it's just Chris Robley.
Chris has been doing a lunchtime live stream every week right before this. So if you want to go to the pre-party before the the Music Career Study Group,
this is, let there be no doubt, this is the main event. That's just the opening act.
Chris, don't sell yourself short. Everyone loves a good pre-party. And yeah, well, you should, speaking of resolutions, this is kind of something you started at the end of the last year and might kind of come up in some of our conversation about music predictions for 2025. But you were doing this previously a few years ago and dove back in. And yeah, I think it is. Is this one of our things in the list? So I don't want to spoil it if it is.
No, well, I don't think so. Is it related to the live stream?
Well, you were just talking about moving back to wanting to it was for my presentation for the NAMM show. You and I were talking. I thought one thing that you said that was relevant for this conversation is feeling like you were missing out on the performance, since the stage of life you're in. It's hard to tour, play a lot of shows, and missing out on just feeling like good at performing. And getting back to live streaming was one of those things you wanted to up your game in that area again, and also just experience the joy of performing for people.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? We could tie that into one of the predictions. So if we want to save it, it might relate to the first one.
That's why I was curious if that was a part of it. But anyway, we've got a good list here. It goes from things from your individual pursuits as artists and what we think artists, the trends and how they pursue their music career, to the music industry at large, to things that artists use like social platforms. We've got a lot of predictions, and I think we got some good stuff here.
Yeah, and to state again, we want to hear your predictions too. So put them in the comments. What do you think is going to happen during 2025, either in the industry or with your own music?
And Sean agrees. The first 10 and last 10 are the worst. Yeah. Charlie's listening from the UK again. You may have already said that. Sometimes we both post the things. It's hard to keep up. Anyway, let's dive in. We've got a bunch of predictions. I think a lot of them are going to come true.
Yeah, and some are a bit vague. Some are very specific. I guess I could lead this off with on the social media front. I think we're going to see something equivalent to what do they call it after COVID? The Great Resignation. There was like this massive wave of people retiring or staying home, quitting their jobs, staying home, refusing to return to the, there's just work habits and workforce labor stats, all this stuff was so greatly affected. I think we might see something similar with social burnout, where not because people are aging out, but they're just exhausted with the hamster wheel of how social media functions, playing to the algorithm, constantly worrying about their metrics and, their vanity metrics, how many views they have, how many likes, when what really feeds the soul is more authentic engagement, conversations, something like, did people comment on this? And did I talk to them? Did I have an actual human connection with the few people who liked this, as opposed to how many people liked it? And so I think if you are on YouTube, you might see occasionally some of your favorite YouTube personalities saying, I quit, and they'll make the thumbnail that says why I quit YouTube or whatever. And usually what they mean is I'm getting back to what my passion is, and they're not literally quitting YouTube.
Yeah.
But I think something similar will happen, and we're going to see, Jack Conte, who founded Patreon, last year was saying a lot that the age of the follower is dead. These platforms are now totally about recommendation and all this stuff, and we have to find a way to steal the joy back for ourselves. Anyways, that's a long-winded and vague thing of, I think social habits for creators will drastically change.
Yeah, I agree. And you and I, when we were talking about this, you mentioned, is this just because we're getting older? I mean, Chris, we look just as young and amazing as we
ever
did 20 years ago. Actually better. So we often get confused for young, spry 20-year-olds. But we are aging. And you were like, is this just because we're getting older? And I said, no. In fact, I have seen more Instagrammers and YouTubers saying, I'm done with this. And they all actually tended to, because I think the older generations on social that have adopted social are probably not feeling the burnout as much as the younger audiences, who I think have put like so much intensity into these platforms, only to feel like the joy of making music is being robbed, and they're not making music for people anymore. That was one of the main points of the video you and I were watched yesterday about the I Quit YouTube, where the point was, I'm doing everything for this algorithm that is constantly changing, and it's all about, it forces everybody to think about discovery and not actually cultivating a community, a relationship with their, making music that people love and making music that moves people and does something in the world, and ultimately making music that's fulfilling for yourself.
Yeah.
And I feel like that there's a massive burnout for that.
Well, just to tie it into the live streaming thing, that in my own life, I think I reached a point where I said, if I can dedicate X amount of hours per week to my music, do I want to be doing it in this like constant obsession over new discovery, new algorithmic engagement, or do I just want to play again and like talk to the few people who I know are kind of diehard fans and like remember what it's like to actually have a community? And so I said, well, yes, I can live stream, once a week, whether there's 5 people there or 5,000, I'm going to do it either way. And literally I will do it if no one shows up, and I'll have to tweak things and get better and improve until people start showing up. But I did set a numerical goal. I was like, my goal is I would love for the end of the year to have 75, what do you call it? People listening at the same time, whatever that's called, real-time engagement or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had a benchmark that I would like to achieve, and then I'm going to work towards. But ultimately, it started with maybe being like, I will do this no matter what. So then from there, it's all just kind of candy and or self-improvement.
I think Gary Vee would approve of your strategy.
Oh,
because he's always like, you shouldn't worry about the size of your audience because you never know who's in that audience. The number doesn't matter. That you could have 20 people watching, but 2 people in that audience, one might be a music supervisor, one might be this person, or they might just be people that love what you do, and that's all that matters. Malia said, aren't you guys around 32? Just a couple years older, just a couple years older.
There was a great kind of meme thing going around a few weeks ago where the Coachella lineup poster, do you know those when a festival?
Oh yeah.
And it's got 100.
But you have to zoom way in just to even see who's on. Can't they just list this where we can see it?
And I forgot the equation. It was great. It was like your age is the number of artists you actually recognize on this list plus 20 or something like that. And I went through it. I did it. I was like, oh, it got my age almost exactly.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. We've got people are dropping in their predictions. Again, if you're just joining us, we're talking about our music predictions for 2025. We want to hear yours as well. We're talking, our first bucket of predictions relates to social media and platforms. David said the platforms musicians use will tie into their political views. I think that's already happening to some degree. On a side note, John asked, why is Reverb Nation not going after Spotify streaming? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. If you're talking about like, why aren't we engaging with them? That's a whole different conversation. Prediction: platform emerges to replace TikTok if banned, or compete with TikTok if it is not banned. Musicians try to figure out a way to make it work. I think that's always going to be the case, because the way people communicate, especially in a digital world, seems to change faster and faster and faster. And we won't jump into it yet. It's like number 4 on our list, but we will address the TikTok thing in just a second. Let's see. Sean has a prediction. Oh wait, no, that was Sean's.
Mustafa.
Definitely develop K-pop with other music genres.
We have a prediction towards the end of the list that's touches upon this actually. So
yeah, I think we probably should have done a few more. Like, I think you're going to see more and more genre blendings. And in fact, I was signing up, like pitching a track to something where you had to select your music and all that kind of stuff, like style. There was this giant list of genres that went up for infinity. I'm like, I don't even know anymore. I don't even know what half these genres are. What is the difference between this pop and that pop and this pop and that pop? I'm like, I don't know. So yeah, I feel like the idea of genre, the lines are going to get even more blurred as culturally collaborations happening bring a lot of, like, we already seen that with Latin American music and Mexican music, and infusing with hip hop and other things that are creating some interesting new genre combinations.
I was thinking like on the TikTok one, our next prediction is somewhat related to that, and is less about a new platform coming out that dominates. My prediction is that we're going to favor, at least in the US, the devil we know. And so what I mean by that is Meta, I think, will dominate 2025. And like I said, there will be a lot of attention put on social media for its damaging impacts on children. So governments, parents, even kids may turn away from Snapchat, Be Real, TikTok. Who knows what will happen with TikTok. We'll talk about that in a sec. But I think there's a perception that Facebook and Instagram are like the safer incumbents. And I think even just as a sort of social cultural shift, we might lean towards that, making it an even more indispensable app for musicians who want to build an audience. And, the maybe ironic part of it, I think the net negative impact on people's mental wellness and all this stuff is going to be just as bad as on Facebook as Instagram as it would be anywhere else. But there's a perception of Facebook, I think, or of Meta being safer, more responsible, and also American, so that there's some, cultural favoritism as well.
Yeah, and that includes Instagram. When you say Meta, that includes Instagram. We didn't have it on our list, but I have 2 teenage daughters, and they love music. They listen to it nonstop because I'm a good dad. and they have no interest in social media. You know what their social media is? They have a friend group of about 15 to 20 of their friends. They're on Google Chat, and they have different, it's almost like a Discord server, how they naturally create it. They've got different chats on different topics, but it's just their friends and people they care about. And they talk about these things. And instead of, you go to social media and it's like people who don't know each other just shouting at each other, and or feeling like you're talking to the void for likes and plays, instead of like, hey, I'm communicating with people I care about. So I could see fan communities developing in a similar fashion with younger audiences. Like, I don't care about all that incessant content. I just want to hear stuff and communicate with people about things that I'm passionate about, and bring back more of the fun of this and less the drudgery.
Yeah. David, it was almost having an opposite in light of recent Zuckerberg headlines. I was thinking musicians would veer away from Facebook. I don't think so.
No.
The next thing on my list was, I think that targeting in music marketing and music advertising will become almost obsolete. And Meta's tools in particular are so good at targeting. If you set an extremely wide audience, it'll find the right people for you. So Meta tools will actually be optimized for non-targeted audiences, except maybe, the basics of targeting people within a particular country, let's say. But that will be kind of like an easy button for advertising, thankfully. And all of the little minutiae we used to have to do of segmenting and creating all these different audiences and targeting will kind of go out the window.
Yeah. And this is both Chris and I work in marketing, and this has been a frustrating thing for marketers, especially marketing music. If you've run ads over the years, you've seen options of targeting specific audiences. Like, I used to be able to run ads and say, I want to target audiences of these bands that would have similar fan bases as mine. That all went away. And you're like, what the heck, Facebook? And now when you go, I think the only band I searched a ton, and the only art I know, I could find Coldplay as an option, and I don't think anything else, which was weird. I don't think you could even put in Taylor Swift. I tried a bunch.
Yeah.
But it's because they have tools now like AI and other things that are analyzing your content and going, we know better than you. We know better what's happening on this platform. We know where this will work and where it won't, and just trust us.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to prove out to be the way to go. Another thing on this list, Chris, that we don't have is, as it relates to social platforms, or basically marketing. I'll kind of include this as a marketing thing. SEO is almost, I think SEO is dead, because even when I do a Google search, what I look at now is the AI
The
response
AI
at the
answer.
top.
It's better, it's quicker, it synthesizes it. It's like, why have that extra click?
Because Google, we used to go there, search things where websites would come up with that information to answer the question. Now Google's doing it. So I think AI is going to kill a lot of the way people navigate the web, which will obviously impact marketing. And yeah, it's going to be big.
The next one is TikTok lives. Do you want to do you want to tell us what that means?
Yeah, wait. There was we had that prediction. Who was it that we put on the screen?
It might have been David. I can't remember.
Somebody mentioned it. So if you don't know, TikTok has been banned in other countries previously. I know it was banned in India for a while. I'm not sure if it still is. And in the U.S. government, the current administration that just has a week left passed a law to ban it, which goes into effect on January 19th. So there's a couple things just from that artists should learn, that if you are not actively moving your fans to a place where you own them, email address, phone number, web connection, something where you own that relationship, this is going to be, I think these platforms could potentially get more volatile as geopolitical issues around the world heat up. That you got to have a plan to get your fans off these platforms. Otherwise, if you have 4 million TikTok followers, those could be gone in a week and a half.
On January 19th.
Completely gone. No coming back. So yeah, there's the Supreme Court's hearing hearing about it tomorrow. And the interesting thing is the next administration, Trump has said he loves TikTok and wants to save it, but he's not president until the 20th, and the 19th the day. And I know there's people like Kevin O'Leary, who's on Shark Tank. He's putting together a group of people trying to buy it. But I was digging around this morning, and it sounds like TikTok doesn't want to sell it. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting.
ByteDance doesn't want to sell it.
Yeah, and let's not forget that also means CapCut, the editing platform.
That's the thing that I had the oh crap moment this morning, because I freaking love CapCut. It was like, finally somebody made a video tool for people that aren't trying to make major motion pictures.
Yeah, well, when Trump says save TikTok, it's, interesting to try to interpret what that means, because he was also a very vocal critic of TikTok 5 years ago, or whenever the "we'll ban it" came up from like a national security perspective. What my interpretation is, like, save it as in let's talk a bunch of Americans, or is Kevin O'Leary's Canadian, right? But anyways, let's talk a bunch of people into buying it, so that the national security concern is off the table, but it can continue to exist for creators, for artists, for Trump, who actually does very well on TikTok in terms of reach to his audience. So I'm also like, oh, now you don't want to give it up because it's a good tool for you. Connection to your audience.
Yeah. Well, I think the value of it is that for a lot of younger audiences, that's their preferred platform. Whether it's healthy, beneficial to society, we'll set that aside for this conversation. But as far as it relates to music, obviously TikTok has become a big piece of how labels and artists have marketed music, and created completely different strategies around how music was marketed. Instead of necessarily worrying about featuring the artist, it was all about getting a community of people to do something with the music. Early on, we saw people doing dancing to certain songs that went viral and really propelled songs. It had nothing to do with the artists themselves doing something cool or interesting. It was just sort of became a musical meme. Mm-hmm. And that really changed the trajectory. We saw artists who just wrote a piece of a song on TikTok go insanely viral, get big contracts to only release 3 songs because they don't know how to write songs,
and then get dropped from that label because they weren't a songwriter yet.
And the whole social space has really changed the label system, where labels, if you're an artist and you're thinking about a label, going into a label deal or talking to labels or want that, they're not going to necessarily be interested in your long-term sustainability. They're just interested in that one song. These companies are not looking to invest in an artist's career. They're looking to invest in things that can build their catalog. And so that's one thing that social and how it's changing, I think is going to, I don't know if that'll reach a boiling point this year, but it's definitely a trend. You will see that the idea of an artist going to LA and getting signed by a label and having this storied career, it's just not that way anymore. That doesn't mean those things you won't see art. I mean, obviously we still see pop artists emerging and having careers, but I think those are more of a spike instead of a trend.
Right.
Where you see an artist have a spike and then 2 years ago you're like, I never thought about that person ever again, you know.
Mark and Sean are both sharing some nostalgia for MySpace. I do miss it. You know, it was the butt of all our jokes for a long time, and now I'm like, it's pretty amazing.
It was pretty cool.
Uh,
Solved a lot
John,
of problems for artists and opened a lot of doors for artists without feeling like it took over your life.
John saying they've been collecting emails, fan emails for 8 years. That's good. So you won't be devastated if TikTok goes away. Our next category of predictions is around AI, which, you know, depending on your interest, you might be sick to death of hearing about this, but I think it's exciting and terrifying for human musicians. So it's important to talk about.
Might be a good time to go back and rewatch The Matrix.
Yeah. Or
That movie's
2001.
starting to look more like Prophecy than it is.
Uh-huh. 2001, Terminator, all of them.
Yeah. Chris, the Consumer Electronics Show has been going on this week in Las Vegas. And at the start of this, actually, before we dive into AI, I want to remind everybody, you are watching the Music Career Study Group. If you're enjoying this, like or thumbs up it. Feel free to share it. We'd love to get more artists, knowing we're doing this on a weekly basis every Thursday. But this week, Chris, I at the top of the show, I said there's already been more headlines this week than it's like mind-blowing. Just from the threads I've been seeing about the Consumer Electronics Showcase in Las Vegas, it feels like a mind-numbing amount of crazy AI technology hitting everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you and I talk a lot about how, in the world of music tech and technology, it'll be like a couple of years where it's like, yeah, there's new stuff, but nothing that feels like it changes or makes a big giant impact on how people pursue music, how music is marketed, how it's distributed. But I was watching a lot of that coverage and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I had thought in a weird way, like, that for the past 4 or 5 years, the only truly revolutionary thing was TikTok. Everything else seemed to be a continuation of past evolutions or trends. And even as all this talk of AI over the past 2 years has been ramping up, I still felt like its moment isn't here. Like, the thing that we could either get truly excited or terrified about hasn't arrived. But I do think that's happening this coming year in 2025. I think the real impact will start to be felt. And I think the entire world, music listeners, musicians, streaming platforms, major labels, everyone will be faced with how obvious it is that there's just a problematic flood of AI generated content that will be pushed to some kind of breaking point. I don't know what that's going to look like, if that means that like distribution will become a lot harder to come by, or if it's accepted by the big power players. And then basically the breaking point is for human creators to have to reckon with that. But there's going to be some cultural moment, if that makes sense, this year around how much AI music is being made and actually how good it gets.
Yes. And along that, here's our very specific prediction. This year, we will see our very first massive AI hit. And
Agreed.
The thing that will shock the industry or frustrate people is that they'll find out that the average audience member or listener doesn't care
Doesn't
that
care.
it's AI. They don't care. They're not paying attention enough. And yeah,
I have a slight amendment to that. So I agree. I think the first AI true hit will happen. I also think this will be the year that there will be the first AI viral hit, which might not be a chart topper, but it's going to get massive traction on a social platform. And it will be, how do I say this? It will be the first "we don't care that it's AI" viral hit. As in, up till this point, anytime something goes viral that is AI, it's usually within the context or the wrapper of this is AI, and that's part of the story. It either makes it more funny or more interesting somehow, and that this little audio snippet or song that goes viral will happen of its own merit, and we won't care or even know that it's AI. That's my
yeah.
slight tweak prediction on that.
But what I think though is beyond like, hey, someone made like a cool chorus that went viral on TikTok. I'm talking like a label will just release an AI song that's played on radio.
Yeah.
That gets traction.
And possibly from an AI artist. It's not just a one-off, it's a constructed brand or whatever you want to call it. They have some sort of avatar that people enjoy and follow.
Yeah. And John saying we're already hearing AI being used in indie circles. Bands that were painfully simple now have production far beyond their capabilities. And this is one of those things where I have mixed feelings about, because as a creator, where I think AI is helpful and useful is that I've got all these ideas in my brain, and when I started out in music, the blocker to getting most of those out of my brain was mountains of money. In order to make a video, in order to make a record, in order to even to attempt, it started with you had to have mountains of money. Then you had to go get specific expertise in various areas. But that still doesn't address that I've got a good idea in my brain that might be good regardless of my expertise to be able to visualize, but I can talk about it. I can see it in my mind's eye. I can hear it in my mind's ear. How you're always like, I've got this idea for a melody. I don't know how to make it happen. I love that AI helps actualize those ideas.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the benefit of AI to the creator. It actually liberates the creator to be the creator, not this professional engineer, not these other things that cost lots of money. But at the same time, I think also it can cause artists to skip steps where they don't earn the knowledge, the experience, and it falls flat.
Yeah. Well, a part of what I'm predicting we'll have to grapple with at some point as a very wide society here is that the least powerful voices in this discussion are the artists, the human creators. The major labels have a bunch of power that they can still wield because they manage a catalog that was made by humans. And so to the degree that they want to conserve their power, continue to generate money, then they do have an incentive to force the streaming platforms to block or to at least slow down the flood of AI content, because it dilutes the royalty pool of this human catalog that they've managed and accrued for 100 something years at this point. So they have an incentive to maybe slow down this flood. The streaming platforms, questionably don't. And then the listener, ultimately, I think all innovation just drifts towards what the listener prefers or allows. And I think if AI starts making that is just as good or better than humans, the consumer won't care. They're going to be like, this is sweet. I get this for $12 a month. Keep it coming. And then the human creator will realize we're sitting in the chair with the least amount of recognition or power. So that's the thing I think we'll have to grapple with and innovate around, because there will always be a place for human creation and live shows, that sort of artisanal, handcrafted thing that drives up price in other areas of life. It may be the same for musicians, but we have to get more creative and find out how to monetize our humanity when your average music consumer is just fine
Yeah.
with other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this goes along kind of with what you're saying. I think the stigmatization is like you're saying, like people pay more for cleaner organic food over the cheap fast food junk. Um, or organic, real, homegrown, made music kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, like that's another interesting comparison. I think it'll be like what people think about cosmetic surgery, uh, to a degree, because cosmetic surgery taken to the extreme, people start looking like freaks. But so that would kind of almost make it like the minimal AI usage, the enhancements help,
Uh-huh.
but you go too far, you start looking like a crazy person. Um, oh, and this is David brings up a good point, because I was just going to say this: labels using AI to craft hits. What's your prediction for this fallout for live artists? So here's the thing: I think we may mention this coming up. We have sort of an industry section, but what we already said about labels not caring as much about signing artists that they think this person's going to generate a career's worth of catalog that is valuable to them. Instead, they've gone out and just acquired catalog where they can get a song here. That's fine. An artist that we work that's popular for 5 albums, great. If they have a bad album, we don't care. They're gone. It's like we're just about building catalog. And a lot of the lawsuits that are happening around AI are about IP and who trained the AI on what it's been trained on. And I think, you know, Universal Music, if they were smart, and I'm sure they're doing this, they should buy Suno, train it off of their catalog, and just crank out hits for themselves.
They don't need to buy it when they're suing it, and Suno can't afford the damages. If they lose the suit, those labels will just own Suno for free.
Yeah.
Well, for the legal costs.
And then they don't even need artists potentially.
Yeah.
And so I could see that system going the way of like how a lot of other big corporate systems in our world have, where you can see this a lot in the food industry, where it's like, how can we cut costs? How can we simplify? How can we just make something that looks like food edible that people will just be addicted to? Because that's the other thing I think about AI is you can crank the dopamine hits to a point where it's just like, I know this isn't as good as like authentic music, but I keep eating it.
Yeah. I just have a 4 points I'll try to make very quickly on AI for predictions. Since AI is about abundance, kind of unlimited abundance, and with that comes the problems of deep fakes and, you know, trustworthiness and lack of credit for things. And I think we'll hear more in the music industry about blockchain as a way of kind of counterbalancing technical innovation. So, where AI is about abundance, blockchain is about digital scarcity. If AI is not crediting it's, you know, sort of trained on everything, but not crediting that influence. Blockchain is a way of kind of adding verifiability and ownership to things. And so, if the two can be blended in some, you know, functional way, it might be an interesting solution.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Malia brought up a good point. Like Reverb Nation and other distributors, as well as YouTube, are requiring that creators disclose whether or not the music art was created by using AI. Also, like the Grammy organization, who one of our coworkers is very high up in the Chicago chapter, they are doing a lot of lobbying to, well, first, you can't be nominated for a Grammy if you have AI music, and you have so you have to disclose that. And they're lobbying a lot to make that clear and guidelines. But the problem becomes is AI has just become this bucket term for some people. Are just using it when it's really not AI, just make it sound like, make their company sound cooler, when it's really just automation. But AI is infused in so many things behind the scenes that we don't even know. Like when you're using Gmail, you're typing things out. AI is trying to predict what you're going to say and fill things in or start answering things for you. So it's like, how do we even know what was made with AI or not? Like plugins and certain things with some of the recording platforms are starting to incorporate AI. What does that even mean? So I think it gets so hard to even know that it's going to be a big challenge.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting point of like, if I manually use auto tune to whatever degree and fix my vocals, that's not AI. But if I tell, some auto tune agent to just, hey, just auto tune my stuff and it does it, like, is that suddenly disqualifying?
Yeah, there's so many questions. Anything is that was let me see, let me go back to
Well,
anything else?
just a few things. Century of IP precedent is going to be established this year. That Suno lawsuit we mentioned,
Yep.
whether AI can train itself on copyrighted content without attribution, what your likeness and your recognizable brand as an individual creator means in a world of AI and how you can protect it. That's all going to be shaped in the courts over this coming year. I personally think that as music marketers, we're going to think that AI solves all these problems. We're like, hey, cool, we can have an AI agent that just tweets for us, or like that makes lyric video snippets and posts them every 2 days automatic. It's like, oh, it solved our marketing problem. But like every solution is just going to cause more problems, more noise. Everything will be flooded with AI content that we will, I think, eventually reject that. And hopefully listeners in some way will not do what I suggested before and have like a kind of a pendulum swing moment of like, we're sick of this hyper personalized music that's coming to us, because ultimately music, one of the beautiful things about music is that lots of people can come together around it. So community forming around an artist means that everything can't be hyper personalized. Sometimes there need to be common touch points in society. And I think
Yeah.
we'll go more back towards that direction after we've got completely sick of everything hyper personalized.
Yeah, I think we've created a scenario where you create a world of endless possibilities where you can get anything you want, but nothing you really want, like human connection, meaning, purpose. It just fills the stream with glut, noise, that only ultimately makes you feel miserable because
Yeah.
all it screams is you're never enough.
Yep.
That it's telling you you cannot be happy. That thing that brought you joy, it's not enough. You need all these other things. And so then you try to create these AI things to solve those problems, and you're still missing out. You have access to everything, but getting nothing you want, what you truly want. And I think that's where the big ultimate challenge with AI, where that connection of somebody like as an artist, and I'll mention this more in our last section, where as an artist, you like when you make music, and that one of the YouTube I Quit videos you and I were talking about, it was all about I'm making music to see a number next to my Spotify track go up. And this person was saying that, hey, if Spotify just removed the visible track counts, a lot of these problems would be solved because they're vanity metrics. So it causes people to focus on that, focus on the algorithm, as opposed to focus on did a human like this? Because I could go buy bots and influence that number. And so what am I even doing in the first place? But when you're an artist and like you're at a show and you playing a song and you see somebody in the audience just either having the time of their lives or just emotionally moved by what you're doing, it's a feeling you'll never experience doing anything else. Knowing that you created something that is like having that kind of impact on a human level is mind-blowing.
Mark is saying, curse the person who gets everything they want.
Yeah.
Now we have some industry predictions, and don't forget you're tuning in to the Music Career Study Group, and it's an open discussion, so we want to hear your predictions as well. My first music industry prediction is that 2025 will be the year we see an individual artist music catalog sell for $2 billion.
Yeah, that could be the case. That
Yeah.
could be the case. There's only a handful of people that could
Command that.
Actually, because somebody sold a catalog this year. I'm trying to remember who it was. And I thought, I would have thought that would have gone for a lot more than that. Might have been Queen.
No, Queen, because Queen was the biggest sale yet. It
Okay.
was like 1.3 billion.
There was somebody else that only got it was like 400 million. I was like,
Oh,
kind of
was
like,
it
oh,
Pink Floyd? Pink
that's it. That's
Pink
it.
Floyd's was less than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I'm like, really? I mean, and you're thinking, dang, Kevin, I'd take 400 million. But we're talking about some of the most iconic music ever made in modern times, and the people that are trying to amass these catalogs, for them, that's still kind of a bargain.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to make a prediction about whose catalog will sell for 2 billion, but someone this year. The next thing is, I think that a long tail distributor, by which we mean a music distributor who deals with independent artists, will go through a massive and surprising transformation. Slightly vague about this, but you
Chris,
may
who
know.
might that be?
Well, would you like to add any color to it, or why?
Well, if you, Chris and I we were born and raised in indie distribution, brought it through its rough junior high years, got it
Toddler
through
years,
high
yeah.
school, got it off to college, and said, "Have fun." And yeah, so we know a lot about just the trends in that space, and know a lot about a lot of the distribution platforms that there's a lot of them that I feel like in general, especially with the AI question out there, they've kind of reached a plateau for several reasons. They're all based on needing to distribute more and more and more content, not quality content, more content. While the industry is grappling with fraud and the AI question, there's a pushback, and one distribution company is they announced is set to be acquired. The deal hasn't gone through yet. The CEO acquiring that company referred to indie distributors as garbage merchants. So that can't fare well for them. But then I know a couple other distributors that are having some serious issues to just maintain that growth. That doesn't mean they're going away. But that means I think we're going to see some drastic changes in that space, whether one does go out of business or they say, nope, no longer everybody available or welcome, right, or we're drastically changing our pricing structure. The idea that we can just soak in more content, especially with AI and fraud being such a massive issue, and a massive issue that caused said CEO to call all these people garbage merchants, because all these streaming platforms, the revenue's based on market share, not actual usage. Mm-hmm. So these, the one being acquired by UMG has a vested interest in limiting what goes on there, because they want less independent artists, because that same CEO was one of the main reasons why for the first 1,000 streams, you make zero money.
Yeah. Well, and also if anyone's listening and kind of getting worried, is my distributor going to go out of business? Normally what happens when these changes and transformations happen in the distribution world is the catalog is usually ported over to some other distributor to manage, or it might just be, hey, we're keeping this catalog, but we're just going to change our name and our policies moving forward. So mm-hmm. don't necessarily worry that your music is going to get pulled down because of this point.
In our previous jobs, we were a part of acquiring multiple catalogs for that very purpose, and we made sure there was zero disruption to their music being online. So what else?
My next prediction, and hopefully the first 9 days of January haven't already proven me wrong, but I think this is the year that Taylor Swift will stay home. I think we're not going to hear much from her, or, comparatively at least. And she will reemerge in 2026 to conquer the world once again.
Did you see the note I added on our document, Chris? I don't know if you saw it.
I'm seeing it now. She needs another breakup. That's true.
Travis Kelce, I'm sorry, but her career depends on your feelings getting trashed, because none of her fans want to hear happy songs.
That's good. That's a good point.
In fact, it's funny because I saw an article or something where there is like serious concern in her fan community that she appears very happy with this relationship, and how's she going to write her next record?
Oh no, disaster.
Disaster.
Next thing on my list was that Spotify's grip on the industry will loosen even further as it becomes cooler and cooler for artists to blossom in some strange corner of the internet first, and then they'll turn to Spotify eventually as just a mere delivery system to audiences whose tastes were established elsewhere. And I don't know if that sounds vague or strange, but basically Spotify for 9 to 12 years now has been like the industry tastemaker. Tastes are being formed on that platform, and I really think this will be a year where we notice tastes are happening and being created elsewhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk, not just with music, but that people have consumers have hit streaming fatigue. It's Netflix and Disney Plus are all very concerned because, and all the other platforms, because, you know, the promise of a lot of these platforms was cut the cord from cable, you'll pay way less, have access to more content, and you'll be happy. And most people have found themselves, now I've got an even more fractured ecosystem. I'm paying more for a lot of this content. Most of it I don't care about. A lot of it is still on cable. And I think there's a lot of pressure on these platforms because, again, they're sort of, just like I mentioned about indie distribution, they're sort of reaching market saturation and they need to grow. And the only way they can drive revenues by increasing prices. And related to Spotify, Spotify had hit some profitability in this past year, but it's still a long ways away from like what these investors want from this platform. And the only way to do it is to keep raising prices. There's just, because what else can they do?
Mm-hmm.
And I know Spotify has talked about adding video. It may be available in some territories, or but it's some tests. I'd heard they're running some tests, but I know it's not here in the US. When I go to Spotify now, I was talking to an artist recently. I'm like, when you go to the Spotify homepage, it used to be I'd see or do a search, all music related searches. Now I'm seeing maybe one artist. I'm seeing a podcast. I'm seeing an audiobook. I'm seeing, the album, the song, but I'm seeing a lot more stuff pushing things out of the way of it just being about music, making it harder to find artists. So like what you're saying, the idea that, there was this golden moment when playlists were new and exciting. I feel like the platforms are gotten worse. Discovery has gotten harder, and they haven't provided the tools to really make that easier. And that's happened on a lot of the platforms related to like Netflix and such as well.
Yeah. One of the things you just said, so, as people are getting like subscription fatigue, I think it'll be interesting because I also think 2025 will be the year that the major music streaming platforms will create even more paywalls, like you're saying, within. So there's going to be like the exclusive content of like, oh yeah, your normal Spotify subscription gets you all this vast amount of music, but you want to hear the new Adele live album?
Yeah.
That's going to be $12.99. Oh, you want to see that whatever live stream Radiohead video? It's an extra $2. That's kind of
the in-app purchase. The in-app purchase. Right. It's like, why am I paying $12.95 for that live Adele album? And it's still only on that platform. And if I cancel my subscription, it's gone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Exclusives that cost money. Yeah. Somebody, John said, "Oh, for the days of physical media."
Actually, that's interesting because David, right before that, said, what might these weird corners of the internet be where people can get discovered? And one of the most notable stories from last year, from 2024, I'm actually spacing the artist's name, but how they got discovered, as far as I understand it, is a very old-fashioned sort of thing. Like they built a website that looks like almost intentionally trashy, like it was made in 2004. They appealed to music blogs, very like niche sound blogs. They got stories written about them that led to the website, and people started consuming this music a lot, and it wasn't even on Spotify yet. So this massive breakout success happened, and I think to tie it to the physical media, I think this artist was selling cassettes.
Yeah.
So it's like this super old school, still 21st century story, but old school. Can you say old school 21st century? Yeah.
You just did.
Yeah. So basically, to answer this question, I think wherever niche communities are gathering, it could be old school music blogs, it could be on Discord. If there's a Discord server for a particular genre or local music scene or something, it'll feel more homegrown and underground until it gets this sort of critical mass within that small community. And then it may involve cassette, vinyl sales, whatever. And then eventually, hey, we're now on Spotify, months after tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people have already acquired this music. So when it gets to Spotify, it's got that momentum and story built in.
Yeah. I think, I was watching a video by another artist who created an algorithm to scrape Spotify to detect AI generated tracks to see if artists were, releasing AI generated tracks and calling it their own. That's a whole different topic. But one of the things they mentioned was like they no longer release music to Spotify, and this artist has millions and millions and millions of streams, and they're just releasing it maybe direct downloads or just to pay. This person was pushing Patreon, so it's their Patreon community. So the Patreon community gets the music. The people that want it, the people that enjoy it, and actually like listening to it. I'm not going to say this is a New Year's resolution because I'll probably do it like 3 more times, if that, for the rest of the year. But leading up to Christmas, I play at my church every week, and we were doing some arrangements for some songs, and someone asked me to put together an arrangement for Joyful, Joyful, the Beethoven song, like that a band could play. And I was working on it. I'm like, hey, this actually came out cool. I wrote an additional chorus to it. And then I'm like, I'm going to use this to up my production game because I've been getting better over the years. But I'm like, I'm going to actually like write, record, produce, and mix everything, which I never mix anything. But so it was really the mixing piece. And then I was like, this came out good. Not that I thought it was amazing, but I'm like, I want somebody to hear it. Just like when you create something, you're proud of yourself. You just want somebody to hear it. I don't care if they hate it. I just want to say, I'm showing you my work. This is what I did. And I felt so much joy and fulfillment by just like, I ended up giving it to my mom and sister because I also sang on it, which I'm not a singer. Thank goodness for BandLab's Auto-Tune. It's freaking amazing.
I thought it sounded good, by the way.
Thank you, Chris. I did send it to Chris as well.
Yeah.
But I sent it to a couple of people, like my bandmates, and said, I made this. I wanted you to hear it because I want you to see my progress. I want you to see I'm still growing. I want you to see that I'm excited about what I'm doing. And I felt more fulfillment and excitement about that than releasing any track to sit on Spotify to sit there and see 0 streams. And I could see more artists adopting that approach with their fans. Like, why do I care about Spotify? These 100 people, like, and I sent it to one of our small town poets, super fans, like super fans that I chat with online all the time. And he freaking lost his mind. And I just thought, how cool is that for him? He says we're his favorite band, and one of the guys gave him a track that's not even available anywhere else, just for him.
I mean, it's kind of like writing a letter. There's just that more care and personal connection. It feels like when you send a letter.
Yeah.
Mark is saying about Taylor Swift, except she's going to drop her last 2 releases this year, or re-releases. That might disprove my prediction. So to counterbalance that, she needs to stay home. Those releases can come out. I'm
sure she'll stay home because that's been an insane world tour.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got just one more section. Should we run through it?
Yeah, this is, if you're joining us, and haven't you didn't hear us say this is the Music Career Study Group. We're here every Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We have topics of covering everything from marketing to distribution to what's happening in the industry. So we'd love for you to join us. We normally try to wrap it up in an hour, but it's the beginning of 2025 and there's a lot going on. So we got one more section. So
Oh yeah, and so one last industry prediction, and this one comes from my daughter, who knows better than I do about these things. Gracie Abrams will become the dominant megastar of the year, and this is according to a 12-year-old. She says she'll have a year like Chappell Roan did in 2024, and she will build her future as the next T Swift style artist. And so, and I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, that amount of influence over an audience. It's like, that maybe those are my summary, but it was like she'll have a really deep connection with her crowd. So there you go, Gracie Abrams.
Yeah. And Mark agrees with you that she's going to lay low this year. Regardless of what you think about fame and celebrity, pulling off a tour like that for that long is insanely stressful because yes, it's fun being the artist, but Taylor Swift is like the CEO of a giant corporation that needs to be fed. There's thousands of people that maybe not thousands, but hundreds that rely on her for their livelihood. And so there's a lot of pressure you feel when you start realizing, I've been in that space, not to the degree that Taylor Swift was, but where you start building an infrastructure around you that these people rely on your success. And it's a lot of pressure as an artist.
Although, didn't she give out like $140 million of bonuses to her team?
She gave everybody $100,000, including like the truck drivers, because the semi crew just to drive trucks of all that gear is monstrous.
That was a cool gesture.
Yeah.
So this is about indie music as well as just sort of music in general. And this isn't a short, so I'll just read the paragraph I wrote. Will a genre emerge that sounds truly like the future? It seems that despite endless options and hyper niches, music taste and music creation has converged towards a mean. It's a big mean, yes, but still, it feels like the days of musical revolution are over. But that can't be true. So essentially what I'm saying is, in a time that is full of so much technological and geopolitical unrest and uncertainty, as well as just how the internet has interconnected tastes and styles from all over the globe, I think this will be a year where something emerges musically that will have the effect of hip hop in the 70s and 80s, or punk in the 70s, or rock and roll in the 50s. Like those moments where like people say, "Oh, this is new. It sounds new. It's dangerous," and all the people over 40 are like, "It's gonna destroy the youth." Like it'll have those qualities where people listen. They're like, "This isn't music." It will be unrecognizable in some way. That's what I hope for and predict this year. Is that after, I don't know. Have you felt, first of all, have you felt like that? I've kind of
yeah, I felt
years whenever I hear something new, I'm like, that's just this with this. But I think something truly new will happen this year.
Yeah, I think one of the things I miss in music, the way everything's so fractured. A couple things. One, where you were mentioning, made me laugh about. I'm old enough. I was around in the 80s. I remember when like rock and roll is destroying the world. It's not real music.
Yeah.
Those were amazing times. It was like this, it wasn't what they were saying, it was the music, the style, the clothing, and there was very little political overtones to it. There were some, but I mean like the idea that it was the music, what happened, we need to get back to real music. And that started in the 60s and 70s, but really sort of exploded to its sort of maybe demise or transition into the grunge era. But the one thing I think, I don't know if we'll ever have again in the way the current world works, where everything's so fractured, everyone can have their own individual preferences and be oblivious to what everyone else is doing. I remember walking, I was in high school, walking on campus the Monday after Smells Like Teen Spirit had debuted on MTV that Sunday night. That's when they would drop stuff that they weren't sure how it would get received. That's how they dropped Guns N' Roses on a Sunday night because they hated it.
Mhm.
By Friday, all the hair metal bands were gone. People were destroying their CDs. They were a mockery. And everybody was listening to Nirvana. And it was like a musical shift I'd never experienced before in my life. So sudden and fast. And I'm not sure we'll ever see anything like that again.
I think we will. I think we've just been in a dormant phase because like I haven't had an experience like I remember in the 80s listening to having cassette tapes of hip hop, as like a little kid, and having relatives and people be like, that's not even music. It's not bad music. It's just not music. And I'm waiting for that. And I do think it's still possible. A lot of things that I don't like these days, it's like, I just don't like that it's drenched in reverb, or those guitars are too distorted, but I still recognize it as music. And I want something that's so out of left field that people are like, what is this?
David says, I always said Beavis and Butthead were responsible for the death of hair metal. They loved hair metal, though. Actually, no, there was a line they'd be like, what the hell is this crap? they liked, like, I can't remember if they liked Nirvana and things like that, but I know that that show is so funny.
My next prediction, there's
he said glam metal, really. That's really what he
right.
Heard, yeah.
So there's a silver lining to there's a little bit of doom, and then there's a silver lining here. I think that if you hold on to all the ways you've marketed in the past, running a music career like a real business online will get way more expensive. So email, SMS, Shopify, Squarespace, merch production, your ad budget, all that is going to get more expensive. And you can maybe already see this happening if you've been using something like MailChimp. And every time you try to send an email, they're like, oh, it's more expensive now, more expensive now. Same thing with Shopify. They're just price gouging. Everyone seems to be in price gouging mode. And you reach a point where it's like, are these costs even justified in the return for this tool? And so the silver lining, I think, is that artists at a certain level will learn to do a lot more with less. As a response to the price gouging, we'll be like, nah, don't need MailChimp, don't need Shopify. I'll figure out how to get scrappy. And
Sean says, looking at you, Adobe.
Adobe, perfect. Yeah, all of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll use Canva. And then when Canva charges you too much, you'll use something, we'll get resourceful the way that we used to have to before we got suckered into all these subscriptions.
I feel like the reckoning of the tech bubble is coming in the sense that the tech world likes to build their platforms on freemium, get a bunch of users, give it free, and then charge a crap load, start limiting services and charge a crap load for it. And in the business world, that can work. But for independent artists, these things just start to price you out. Like MailChimp used to be free for 5,000 people on your list. Then they lowered it down. But then when you had to pay, it was like $10 a month. And Chris, you had an experience with MailChimp we were laughing about.
Absurd. Totally absurd. They quoted me $630 a month.
For a list size that's probably a common list size for an independent artist, not like a business that has the budget to pay for that.
It's nuts.
It's nuts. So yeah, I think that's going to be put pressure and challenges on artists. But to me, I think maybe with a lot of what we've talked about, all roads point back to just go back to doing what you love of writing, recording, and making music and giving it to people, selling it to people, doing whatever to just let the music have a life. Don't waste your life trying to manage these things that have very little to negative ROI. So you're just wasting your time, money, and energy on stuff that
doesn't matter
for some promise from some company that they benefit from you believing.
Yeah. Well, my last prediction, someone actually sort of hinted at this when they were talking earlier about K-pop and Latin music. And I think that in the same way that those two genres over the past 20 years have grown and influenced and started to influence other genres, like in the US, we had a lot of like Latin influence in pop music production. I think there'll be a new global sound that has that amount of influence. I don't know where it'll be, but it'll be a region or a country or something that hasn't gotten its fair musical consideration for their own sort of local characteristics of their music.
Here's a thought or a question. Maybe those are the regions where the new authentic music emerges, because I guarantee you all the AI are being trained on Western music and English speaking music.
Oh, so the AI will all be imprinted with Western musical tropes, and so that other region will sound new and fresh and authentic?
Because there's a lot going on in India. There's a lot going on in Latin America. There's a lot going on in other parts of Asia outside of India that is very unique sounding, that's starting to have pop appeal. A lot of crossover with like Bad Bunny was part of the reason why Bad Bunny was a big deal, because he had hits where he was rapping in Spanish, and Americans listening and Westerners listening to music in a language they don't understand, but still liking it. Where other countries have dealt with that for ages. In fact, I know people, we've worked with some who learned to speak English by consuming American content. And I think the opposite might start happening, but I guarantee you AI is not heavily being trained on some of these other genres, these other musical traditions, compared to making sure they base everything off the Beatles catalog. So that could be an interesting thing to watch. So yeah.
Well, do you have any last predictions?
I predict that no matter what happens, music is awesome. People love making music. People love hearing music, and they love playing music. And as long as there's humans on this planet, that's never going to end.
Amen.
No matter what corporations try to do. So you can take my guitar out of my cold, dead hand.
Here.
As you can see,
I'm imagining the Terminator arm coming and taking your guitar out of your hand.
Yeah. They can try. They can try. No, I think the direction of markets can be different than a direction of a creative community. And at the end of the day, you and I, Chris, have mentioned this many times over the years, from podcasts we were a part of to other things that what was I going to say? I saw the comment and I lost my train of thought.
You said music communities might go in a different direction than markets sometimes.
Yeah. Crap. What was I going to say? It was good too.
And you said you and I had mentioned this many times.
Oh, we used to talk about on the podcast all the time that, oh man, I'll get it. You say something important and interesting and I'll come back to it.
Watermelon.
At the end of the day, yeah, people just got to do what they love. Oh, I know what I was going to say. If it became all about markets and money, and that's your only point for doing music, there are far better ways to make money. Go get an AI job. If a company that creates AI, or actually the industry that is going to be booming, because the biggest scary thing about AI is the power needs. Same with like the blockchain. All this stuff needs an immense amount of power like the world has never seen. And which hopefully doesn't rape the...
Be a nuclear physicist?
Huh?
I said, so be a nuclear physicist?
Yeah. And hopefully in the process, it doesn't rape the planet of all its resources while it's happening. But that was one of the things about like watching that stuff from CES, all AI. It's like the world needs to generate like 100 times the amount of electricity it does in order to even support all of these things. And how we get to that could be good or frightening.
Yeah. So if you want money, go worry about the energy needs of AI.
There you go.
Blockchain. If you want to be a human who makes good
Who's
emotional
filled,
music,
happy, and joyful, make music.
then be a musician. Yeah.
You might be living in a van, but practically we've been doing that anyway. You know, those were some of my best days when I was on the road, and I'm literally wearing the same outfit on stage every night. It was before social media, so there wasn't a million pictures of everything you did every day. And I'm like, I have a backpack and 2 cases of gear that's basically everything I own on the planet, and I'm insanely happy.
Uh-huh.
I was broke, had no money, but I was fed, I'd taken care of, and I was happy.
Yeah. Well, we're potentially going to go to the Folk Alliance conference in Montreal soon. I
Yes.
just went to the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance. This is like a genre folk singer-songwriter centered conference that happens every year, and it's just a beautiful reminder that humans getting together in a space to share their art and to listen to other people's art is still so powerful, so necessary. And the numbers at those conferences don't seem to be suffering, so I think there's as much a need as ever.
Yeah.
Just have
Yeah.
to tap into that, perhaps in new ways or return to old ways. But
Yeah. You and I will be at the Folk Alliance conference. I can confirm that.
oh, okay, good.
You must not have seen the email.
No,
But,
did you send it today?
But I will be at the NAMM show in 2 weeks from today, and I will be presenting on the Saturday. I'll be doing a session. We talk about ROI of marketing, talking about some of this stuff about, but more specifically about marketing and shifts and what's important and looking for to know that you're getting real results from your music. So if you're going to be at the NAMM show, I'd love to see you there and say hi. And yeah, you'll be seeing more of us. We'll be back next Thursday. If you're not on the Reverb Nation mailing list, just go to the website, create an account. It's free, and you'll get our newsletter that tells you the weekly topic. And earlier on, someone asked if we were going to have guests and such, and that's the plan. We'll start incorporating some guests in the show and other topics all across the board. And if you've got a topic you want us to cover, let us know.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Malia. Well, we'll see you next week, same time.
Yep.
Same
Take it
place.
easy. Yes, that's right. See
ya.
ya.